My name was Tarrant Voss, Junior Overseer, 3rd Watch, Prison Barge, Undying Sentence. I say was because the man who boarded that ship is not the one who walked off it. You should know that before I say anything else. I was 26 years old. I had been a tally clerk on a hive world before the Departamento Munitorum found a use for men who could count bodies and not flinch at the number. They gave me a uniform, a las pistol I'd fired 4 times, and a post nobody wanted. The Undying Sentence was 11 decks of rust and prayer, built 900 years before I was born, still limping through the void because the Adeptus Mechanicus said scrapping her would offend the machine spirit. 6,000 prisoners in her holds when I boarded. Traitor guardsmen, cult confessors, debtors, murderers, men who'd said the wrong thing to the wrong priest. All bound from the court world ash register to the penal legions at cult's reach, a 9-day crossing through routine warp lanes. It was not supposed to take 24 hours to become the worst day of my life. It only took 1. Hour 0. I remember the smell first. Recycled air, stale and metallic, laced with the sourness of 6,000 unwashed bodies. The prison decks ran narrow and low, lit by failing glow strips that buzzed like something trying to speak. I did my rounds with Overseer Prine, older than me by 20 years, missing 2 fingers on his left hand from a mess he never explained. "Don't look them in the eye," he told me. "They'll remember your face longer than you remember theirs." We had a commissar aboard, Commissar Reyes Dahlquist, thin as a lasgun barrel, voice like a closing door. He walked the transfer manifest twice a day, checking names against the confession seals. He did not smile. I never saw him afraid, not once, not even at the end. There was a chaplain, too, of the ecclesiarchy, Confessor Aldrich Vane, assigned to hear the last words of the condemned before the execution world took them. And below, in the engine vaults, an Adeptus Mechanicus tech priest named Vesselin, more cable and augmetic than flesh, who spoke to the reactor like it was a sick child. One prisoner was different. Manifest listed her only as Cargo Designate 79 Theta. No name, no crime recorded, just a black seal on her cell and an instruction, stamped by an inquisitorial rosette, that no one below the rank of commissar was to open that door under any circumstance. I asked Prine what she'd done. "Don't ask," he said. "Asking is how men end up like her." Hour 2. The klaxon woke half the ship. Not a riot alarm. A containment breach, deck 9, aft cell block, 7-9 Theta's block. I was already dressed. On a barge you sleep in your boots. Dahlquist's voice came over the vox, flat and immediate. "All overseers to defensive stations. This is not a drill. Lock every block you can reach. Do not, under any condition, approach deck 9 unarmed." I ran the corridor with Prine and 2 guardsmen I barely knew, Corporal Ives and a woman named Fenn, who chewed stim tabs like they were candy. The lights along deck 9 had gone the color of old blood, flickering wrong, out of rhythm with the ship's pulse. We found the first body before we reached the block. A guardsman. Not killed. Unmade. His face had folded in on itself like wet paper, and something had been written across the deck plating in what might have been his own blood. I will not repeat the words. I remember them still. I wish I didn't. Fenn was sick. I nearly was. Hour 4. Dahlquist sealed deck 9 from the bridge. Whatever was loose down there, it stayed contained. For a while. He ordered the block guards doubled. Vox reports every quarter hour, no one in or out. I met the chaplain in the mess that hour, saying prayers over a servitor that had gone dark and unresponsive, its cognitive slots smoking faintly. Vane didn't stop praying to acknowledge me. When he finished, he said, "The Emperor protects those who do not stop moving, Overseer. Idle men are easy prey." I asked him what he thought was aboard. "Something that was always aboard," he said. "We only just noticed it looking back." Hour 6. The Vox reports from deck 9 stopped. Dahlquist sent a 6-man team down, Ives among them. I watched them go through the bulkhead camera, grainy and stuttering. I watched the feed die 11 seconds after the door opened. Not static, silence, and then absence, like the recording itself had been ashamed to continue. Nobody came back. That was the first hour I understood we might all die on this ship, and no one back on Ash Register would ever know how. Hour 8. The riot started on Deck 4, separate from whatever was happening above, born of ordinary fear finding an opening. Cell locks along a stretch of block failed, whether sabotaged or simply old, and 300 prisoners came pouring into the corridors like flood water through a cracked hull. I fired my last pistol for the 5th time in my life that hour, and the first time at a man. He was screaming something about the Emperor being deaf. I didn't kill him cleanly. Prine finished it while I stood there shaking, and he didn't say a word about it after, which I understood later was its own kind of mercy. We fell back to a checkpoint with 11 other guards, Fen among them, and held the line with shock mauls and prayer while Dahlquist tried to raise the bridge. Hour 10. Urveselin's voice crackled over the vox from the engine vault, distorted by more than just interference. The Geller field, the tech priest said, is failing in sequence with the containment breach on Deck 9. This is not coincidence. Something in that cell is unmaking the field from within. Dahlquist asked what that meant for us. It means the walls between this ship and the warp are thinner with every hour, the tech priest said. It means whatever was sealed in that cell was never meant to be carried by real space vessels at all. I understood in that moment exactly what 7-9 Theta was. Not a prisoner. A vessel for something that should have been executed the moment it was found, and instead had been logged, sealed, and transported like cargo because someone above Dahlquist's rank had decided it was more valuable contained than destroyed. I have hated bureaucrats before. I have never hated one as purely as I did in that hour. Hour 12. The riot broke against our line and receded, not because we won, but because something worse came down the same corridor the rioters had fled from. I saw it only at the edges of my vision, the way you see a thing in dreams. Wrong angles, too many joints, a shape that made the eye want to slide off it rather than settle. Prine grabbed my arm and hauled me backward before I could look straight at it. "Don't," he said. "Don't ever look straight at it." We lost 4 guards in the retreat. I don't know their names. I am ashamed of that even now. Hour 14. This is the hour reality started coming apart, and I want to be precise about what I mean, because it is not a metaphor. The corridor we retreated through led back to the same junction 3 times, though we never turned around. A voxcaster played Fen's voice back to us in a loop, calm and ordinary, though Fen was standing beside me the whole time, pale and silent. The temperature dropped enough to frost the deck plating, then spiked hot enough to blister paint within the same minute. Confessor Vane began reciting the litany of sealed doors, not from any hymnal. I never heard those words before or since, and his voice was the only steady thing left in that corridor. Whatever was happening to the ship, it seemed to give his prayers a wide berth, like water flowing around a stone. I asked him afterward how he knew the words. "I didn't," he said. "I don't think they were mine to know. I think something wanted them said and used my mouth to say them. That frightened me more than the thing in the corridor had." Hour 16. Dahlquist made the impossible order in this hour, and I carried it out, and I have not forgiven either of us. Deck 9 was gone. Not breached, not overrun, but gone. In some sense, the ship's own auspex could no longer confirm. As though that section of the vessel had stopped agreeing to exist in the same reality as the rest of us. The corruption was spreading along Deck 8, fast, and 40 guards and 300 prisoners were trapped between it and the bulkhead we still held. Dahlquist ordered Deck 8 purged. Full atmospheric vent, every seal blown, everyone aboard it exposed to the void in under a minute. Ives was on Deck 8. He'd survived the first team, made it that far, and voxed us not 2 minutes before the order came, asking for extraction. Overseer Voss. Dahlquist said to me, because Prine's hands were shaking too badly by then to be trusted at the purge console. Execute the order. I want to tell you I hesitated for some noble reason. The truth is simpler. My hands hesitated because they did not want to remember what they were about to do. I pulled the lever. I heard the decompression through the deck plating, a long groan of metal, and a shorter sound I will not describe. Then silence, and Dahlquist's voice, flat as ever. The corruption does not cross a vacuum. Deck 8 is clean. 41 souls for the ship. Ives was on that deck, I said. I am aware, Dahlquist said, and nothing else. And I understood that this was the only apology I would ever receive, and that in his arithmetic it was already sufficient. For the Emperor, 41 was a fair price for 11 decks and 6,000 souls. I did not agree. I have never agreed. I did it anyway. Hour 18. The corruption stopped at the purged bulkhead, as Dahlquist promised. It did not stop the fear. We were down to 19 guards, a chaplain, a tech priest 3 decks below fighting to keep the Geller field patched with prayer oil and desperation, and roughly 2,000 prisoners still alive, most of them locked down and screaming to be let out of blocks that were, for now, the safest place on the ship. Fen didn't make it past this hour. Something reached through a service grate while we secured a junction and took her below the waist before any of us could react. Prine put a bolt of lass through where its head should have been. It didn't stop moving. It simply stopped being visible, the way a word stops being sighable once you understand what it costs to say it. I don't remember screaming. Prine told me later that I had. Hour 20. Vesselin voxed the bridge with the only good news of the day. The reactor and Geller field could hold, patched and bleeding but functional, long enough to make a short translation back to real space near a routine shipping lane. Not Colt's Reach, not Ash Vista, but somewhere, anywhere outside the warp, where the corruption's grip on the ship's fabric might finally loosen. Dahlquist gave the order to fall back to the bridge deck and brace for translation. It meant abandoning the lower prisoner blocks entirely, sealed but unescorted, prisoners and all, some of them still screaming to be let into the corridor we no longer controlled. I do not know how many of those men and women survived what came for them in that final abandonment. I have chosen since not to imagine it in detail. Some choices a man makes to stay useful to himself. Hour 22. We reached the bridge deck with 14 guards left. Confessor Vane. Prine beside me still bleeding from a wound he refused to mention, and Dahlquist ahead of us all, walking like a man who had already decided the cost of the day and simply needed to finish paying it. Vesselin's voice came through, strained past exhaustion. Translation in 90 seconds. I cannot promise the field will hold through it. I cannot promise anything past that number. Dahlquist turned to the 14 of us crowded into the bridge threshold. If we translate and the corruption is still aboard, he said, this ship becomes a beacon for worse things than what we've already seen. I will not permit that. He looked at the reactor control station, then at Vane. Confessor, if translation fails to sever it, you will lead final rites for this vessel, and I will scuttle her myself, rather than let her drift crude by what's left below. Vane nodded once, and did not look afraid. And I have thought of that nod more than almost anything else from that day. Hour 23. Translation hit like a fist through the hull. I do not have better words for it. The ship screamed in its old bones. Every light failed at once, and for 4 full seconds I could not have told you whether I was alive. Then, real space stars, cold and ordinary and more beautiful than anything I had ever seen, filled the bridge viewport. And the wrongness that had lived in the ship's corridors for 20 hours simply stopped. Not defeated, not destroyed. Evicted, the way you evict a tenant who leaves the door unlocked behind them out of spite. Vesselin's voice thinner than before. Geller field intact, corruption signature gone. Whatever it was, it did not survive the translation or chose not to remain. I did not trust that word. Chose. I still don't. Hour 24. We drifted, crippled, until an Imperial Navy escort picked up our beacon 11 hours later. Past the day I'm recounting to you, but I promised you this account would end at the hour the horror itself ended, so I will stop the clock there. Of 6,000 prisoners loaded onto the Undying Sentence at Ash Vista, 1,200 survived to be transferred at the next port. Of 40 guards, 6 of us walked off under our own power. Prine was one. I was another. Dahlquist did not survive the boarding inspection that followed, not killed by anything aboard the ship, but by his own hand in his quarters the night after we docked. I have never decided whether that was cowardice or the only honest thing he did the whole voyage. I still hear the purge order some nights. I still see Ives's name on a manifest I helped file myself, marked deceased, Deck 8, atmospheric exposure authorized. I am recording this now, not for glory and not for absolution. I don't believe in either, not for men like me. I am recording it because someone should know what that ship cost and what it asked of the ones who lived through it, and because silence is its own kind of forgetting, and I will not let the Undying Sentence be forgotten quietly. I did what was asked of me. I do not know even now if that makes me faithful or merely obedient. Perhaps on that ship, on that day, there was no difference left to find. The barge is still out there somewhere, in dry dock, awaiting a decommission order the Mechanicus keeps refusing to sign. I hope they burn her. I hope they never do. I have stopped trying to decide which hope is the honest one. Deck 8 held. That's what I tell myself when the nights get long. Deck 8 held and the ship came home, and that has to be worth something, even now. Deck 8 held.